Hey guys, you're listening to the Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast, where we talk about uncaging your divinely gifted wild heart to be as free and expansive as you were born to be. My goal is to use our stories, guest interviews, and your questions to tease out what has been keeping your wild heart under wraps. I'm your host, Mielle Fox, and together we will shatter the myths of our old stories to set our wild heart free. So thanks for choosing you and showing up today. Hey everybody, welcome back. Another episode of Energy of the Untamed Heart podcast. I'm your host, Mielle Fox. My guest today is Brenda B Bailey. And I love that because it's kind of like what's that word? It's not an iteration and then where you go, ba 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 ba. So I'm so excited to have Brenda B Bailey here with us because she is going to share some information about something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, which is the geekiness of how does science meet spirit. And she is a theta healer, as well as conducting some summits in manifestation and abundance and helping people really use that part of our brain, the theta wave area, which I'm going to let her explain, to help really unlock each of our human potential to tap back into our soul abundance. So with that, Brenda, welcome.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I love, I always say knowledge is power. So anything that we can, I consider myself a student of the universe. So anything that I can learn that can kind of go, oh, let me, I hadn't thought of that or I wasn't aware of that. So always love being able to contribute to that as well as receive it.
I think it's fabulous. And I really love them. I'm going to get into the nitty gritty with the questions in a second. But what I really love is the capacity for each of us to tap into understanding or receiving the language of energy through whatever that means might be. And I have a little familiarity with the different wave patterns of the brain because I'm a little sciencey and a little geeky weird. But for the listeners who may not be quite as acute to the different wave patterns that we have and what they represent, could you briefly describe what theta waves represent and why it's an important area of how our human brain functions in order
Absolutely.
for us to resolve some of our challenges?
So we, as Miel and I are here speaking, and we are in a beta brainwave. And a lot of times, just to kind of so people can understand, I'm not going to go through all of them, but kind of the three here that people are most familiar with are beta, alpha, theta, and of course, gamma. But I'm not going to get into that either. We'll talk about the three main ones so that people can see, like, so we're in beta. When we're awake, we're talking, we're in beta. And then for a lot of people who have, just going up one, so to speak, is alpha. And a lot of people have experienced alpha because there's a lot of people in the world who have experienced energy work. Like a Reiki person goes into an alpha brainwave. And so that takes us, what we're talking about is a little bit more meditative experience. And then there's theta. So when I think when people think of like a hierarchy that we're going up like beta, alpha, theta, it's actually what's happening in our brain is that it is slowing down. So it's not going up or getting faster, it's slowing down. And to give you an idea, a lot of people, monks, go to monasteries and they have their practices so that eventually someday they will be able to maintain a theta brainwave. Because theta is where we connect to the divine. Whoever you to believe to be your higher power, however that works. And it allows us to get those really beautiful objective answers and takes us out of our head, so to speak, because our brain limits us. It limits the thoughts, the information that we can get, even though that sounds counterintuitive. This is where we learn. This is how we read. This is, we get on the internet, Google, however that is. But really, when you're talking in day to day and being out in the world, if you're doing everything strictly from your brain, you're limiting what's possible and the information that you get and even that expansion. so to speak, thinking outside of the box, comes from the theta brainwave. So people experience going into theta all the time. They're just not aware of it. And that's what I do for a living is make people intentional with it, so to speak, when I teach it.
It's fabulous. It's fabulous for so many reasons. It's amazing to me that we enter our human vessel, our soul chooses to come here and spend some time hanging in the 3D, but a little bit like ET phone home, it's almost like your theta wave region of your being is ET phone home. It's like the connector back to from whence you came, so that there's communication between that higher self, that spark of divine back to the divine, whatever one chooses to define divine as. And so, as a conscious being in a human body, to me, it makes total perfect sense. Like, well, yeah, you'd have like the part that your human needs to get through your day and to function and to do all the things. But then you have this other piece that's so necessary to block out all the chitter chatter of your the ego side of your brain that needs to help you to survive in a human world at some point, but yet you need to have that communication connection back to what's beyond us here on 3D. And so, how brilliant is the design to have the theta waves available to help us lean into that connection? And the one word you used, which I really so appreciate, is objective. I think where many of us kind of get caught is that we attach something to whatever, whether that's I attach something to the meaning of a material item, I attach something to the meaning of a given emotion. The truth is, all those things are just things. They're just components, they're just things. They're like to me, they're like little tiny bits of data on a screen. And it's really about what is our human attaching to the thing. So it's not so much the thing as it is how do we choose to perceive? How do we choose to relate? How do we choose to integrate what we decide goes with the thing? So I
Absolutely. And
love,
how
yeah,
we it's typically a judgment
yes.
and it's a label.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
I always say, at my age, right? I Every poor choice that I ever made was based on a reaction. So if I can maintain objectivity, I make much better choices because they come from that divine place of going beyond. Because here's the thing. As children, we were probably in a theta wave all the time. It's why you hear kids talk about, especially at our age, talk about imaginary friends, right? Come on,
Yes.
that was more than that.
Everybody had, okay, so I can remember back, and I'm probably a little older than you, honestly, but I can remember back not only having the imaginary friend, but the creativity within my being and the lack of caring if somebody judged or didn't judge at a particular point as a child, where you could pretend to be the giraffe and you were like,
Wait, a
stretching your
great
neck and trotting around your
imagination.
living room, right? Your imagination was open and
Well, and
wild and expansive.
I had deja vus all the time. Like I would be like, like I can remember being like 3, 4, 5, 6, and going, I've dreamt this. Now, here's the
Yes.
thing, right? I think I'm a lot older than Meow thinks, but it would be that thing that as a child, I knew not to say anything, right? Like I
Yes.
didn't say anything. And nowadays, like kids just talk it, you know what I mean? And it's allowed and it's acceptable and it's not going to get squashed. But of my generation, it wasn't going to be okay. So I just remember thinking, and I remember I had this incident. I can remember I was about 3 or 4, and I was watching TV, and they were talking about reincarnation. And I got to tell you, I got pretty pissed because I thought they had stolen my idea.
Right? Like,
And I was like,
hey,
I knew about
hey,
that. wait a minute. Like I laugh when I think about that because I was like, that's so incredible. And yet I didn't ever share that with anyone. I just had it, like, and what happens, I feel like as humans, we have, our traumas, our wounds, right? However you want to call them. We have what we've experienced in this life. And of course, the stuff that our parents have gone through that they project onto us or that we pick up because we're with them. And, everything else. And life happens. And then we forget who we are. So I often say with Theta Healing as a modality, and I'm a practitioner as well as an instructor, that it's just a reminder of what you're capable of doing. And it is a way to remember who I happen to believe in God. So, you just, if that offends you or whatever, just say
Change the
whoever,
word,
higher
man.
being, right,
Change the
just
wording,
right.
right?
But
The
it's like
concept is
who
there.
right, but who
Yeah.
who God intended you to be. And then we got separated from that because life happened. And we get separated because again, in our knowing in that theta brainwave and being in touch with the divine, right, is a soul connection, right? So what Miel's talking about is like then we are also not just following our heart, but following our soul. So when we are and we get the filters away, because even in that divine connection, if we've got some stuff that's muddying it up, then we have to clean that up so that it can be strong, a strong connection and objective connection and a constant connection, a consistent connection. There's just so many things. But yeah,
Yeah. I sort of sometimes I think of it like, hmm, it's a little bit like sometimes you call your friend on your phone and you happen to be cutting through the canyon or the mountains and your signal's getting glitchy and it's not as clean. So you sort of catch every third word of the convo and you're like, oh, you're breaking up, oh, you're breaking up, or whatever. And sometimes I feel that way when we talk about is your higher self and is your soul truly hearing and clearly communicating back and forth with beyond us here on earth, God or divine universe,
right.
whatever one phrase one chooses to use is fine. But I do feel like sometimes our humanness and I'm going to call it our in and out of the connection, our in and out of being able to remain objective, because that's a moment to moment choice. You're either on your higher self side or you're on your ego minded side. I mean, it's kind of A or B. And so to teach and learn how to have the awareness like, oh, hang on a second, let me catch myself in the moment here. And am I being objective or am I not being objective? And that awareness and clarity gives us the breather to decide, oh, am I deciding this from an objective perspective, which is truly aligned with our higher self, or no? And I do feel we come to it with our filters. Of course we do. I mean, to me, it's really interesting. We spend our whole lives working our way back to the divine from whence we came, and yet we chose to come here to kind of forget that piece. And we spend a long time remembering it to go back to the beginning. So I kind of find it sort of makes me giggle sometimes. I'm like, "Man, isn't this an interesting dichotomy? We choose to come here and get all befuddled up in our humanness. And then we spend an awful lot of time finding our way back out of our humanness to go back to the purity of how we started. And the beauty of it to me, I realize there's a piece where I go, well, that's a little left up. But the beauty of it to me is the journey, the lives that you touch, the lives that touch you, the experiences that you have. Let's face it, tain't nobody getting off the earth without some wounding and scarring and trauma. End of story. If you're a human, welcome to reality as we know it, as we project it, as we perceive it. You ain't getting off the boat here without some dings. So the question becomes, okay, how do I ride the wave, manage the dings, and still enjoy it and still get through it? And so this modality that you share and bring people to through theta healing to me is like opening the door to the possibility. And on the other side is just this whole myriad of, I'm going to call it sparkliness because I don't even know what else to really call it, where you could just sort of, reach out and take a little grab and see what you get with it. It's like the giant treasure hunt of intergalactic time space continuums to me. I'm like, whoa, this is like the ultimate ride. Like this is really it. I'm not going to say every moment of the ride is like, woohoo, can't wait. This is so great. Let's face it, there are sometimes you're like, this ride really sucks. I'd like to get off, please. Like the little kid you put on the roller coaster, and they're like, I'm gonna be sick. But the other side of it is that exhilaration, the joy and the bliss and the possibility. Who wouldn't want that? I mean, what a gift.
Well,
What a
and it's
gift.
also just being in that trust, that
Hmm.
faith. And it takes you, I remember reading, Think and Grow Rich, right? I think everybody has. I'm just going to say
Hmm.
that. The one line that really hit me was worry is just a prayer for what you don't want.
Yeah.
And I feel like that when we can be in that trust and that faith, we are allowing ourselves to have the best possible outcome. But
Hmm.
as humans, we do what we have been trained to do, so to speak. And we're just, we're doing the best we can. I think if anything, I would hope that with this conversation that people can just cut themselves some slack, right? Have some
Yes.
mercy because that's what
Yes.
ends up happening. I remember being in my 20s, right? Going into my 30s, which I feel like is the most painful time for an adult. And just looking at and going, creating and working towards what I've been told I want to achieve as a human, which are all the material possessions and looking a certain way and, all of that. And then going, and then getting there and going, why? But I'm still not happy. And really going,
Hmm.
and there's something wrong with me, right? And then going and looking for help. And, so here's the thing, right? So being a kid, not knowing that I know theta, right? But just knowing, and then doing a lot of disassociating so that I could function in where I was being raised. Nobody could help me, right? Not traditional Western philosophies and medicine could not help me. Because the thing is if you can't recall and tell them why you're doing what you're doing, they can't help you. And then me going, well, who can help me? Right? Like how, so which is why I started looking into alternative. So I have 13 different certifications in alternative healing because I always, I will say this, right? So when I teach, right, I'll have students come up and go, this is my first modality that I'm learning. I don't know if I'll be able to do it as well as you because I don't have the training that you have. And I just look at them and say, congratulations for this being the first one that you find. It took 7 for me to find Theta Healing and and virtually, 13 certifications. That just tells you how effed up I was, that I needed
Well,
that.
okay. So let's
To, to
back the
take me
bus
in that.
up. Yeah, so let's back the bus up because I don't think saying, "Oh, I have, these certifications tells me how messed up I was." I think as we are all starting to really understand, really integrate that the validation of our worth doesn't come from outside of us. And that's a lifelong lesson. Everybody kind of comes to it or doesn't in their own due time. And hey, it's okay, whatever it takes. But I view these different modalities because, like you, I got enough certifications I could freaking wallpaper a wall. I mean, whatever. But each one, although it isn't the thing that I go, oh, this rings so true for me, whatever that is, there's always something I can learn from it. There's always something I can take, like, oh, this was helpful to me because. And I always look at it like well, perhaps if I hadn't done that thing, I wouldn't have breadcrumbed my way to the next thing.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So, like every human, sometimes I go, well, that was a big old waste of my time, or I can't believe I just paid for XYZ, or how come I haven't resolved all these lifelong issues? Whatever, you can go down that road, or you could say, let me stay curious. Maybe this isn't the perfect thing for me, but man, it helped me chip this much away of that whatever I've been working through and on to the next.
I always
And
said
it's
that each
good.
one led me to the next one, that led me to the next one, that
Absolutely.
led me to the next one, and I know that, but
Yes.
it took a lot to lead me to
Yes.
the next one. We'll just say, like, that I guess my point is when I always say to them, I always say, like, I'm so glad that wherever you are, in your life, that allowed you to say, I want to find the quickest, easiest, most painless way to be able to change and to be able to heal. It took me 7 to
Yeah.
get to that one. You chose it the first time around. So congratulations. Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And even within the one, so let's say someone says, hey, I'm going to start out with whatever the modality is that fits for them. And the reason I say whatever is I do believe that for each of us, we have a particular receivership of energetic information that s- comes through most aligned for us. So, what it is for me and what it is for you may not be exactly the same. It could be, or pieces of one or pieces of the other may be the magic cookie dough. Who knows? I don't know. But I'm so grateful that there are so many available options because not everybody takes it in the same way or stumbles over
Absolutely.
the thing that lines up with them right off. Like for some of us, like you and me, it took a few tries, I mean, maybe someone's really lucky to make the best batch of chocolate chip cookies ever. Can you tell I got food on the mind right now? But I mean, maybe they do and they stumble onto that one thing, but then maybe for whatever the reason may be, because there are lessons for us to learn along the way, we don't get it on the first. We get it on the seventh or the 23rd or the whatever. And hey, whatever.
And I
It's
think
all
it's that
right.
thing, like sometimes I hear people say, well, it was really interesting. I love to have experiences, right? I love to learn things. And I've been I went to like this Akashic Record webinar, right? And really got a lot of really great information. And there was somebody in there that was like saying, I can't ever see the records. I can't ever get to the records. And had been like attempting it. It sounded for like at least 10 years, if not longer, but that gets to be part of her story. Like now that's
Yeah.
part of her story. And what I'm really grateful for in myself and how I approached it wasn't like, oh, that one didn't work for me, because they all worked for me. Like everything that I experienced worked for me. It just took me to, a different level that I would find the next thing that would work for me that I needed to work on or that at a deeper level or however that is. Now for
Because
myself,
yeah.
yeah, for myself, like Theta Healing, the heavens did open and the angels did sing. And I went, I, I've been doing this for a living for 20 years. If you had told me that this is what I would be have doing for a living, I would have told you, or, if you had told me 21 years ago, I'd have been like, are you high? No way. Like, why would
Right.
I like can you even make money doing that? Like what is going, like, why would I do that? I'd had a sales company and I, traveled for a living with it and, I mean, very, very mainstream, but it afforded me to be able to take these classes and do these retreats and weekends and experiences and everything that allowed me to be able to do that. But it was at that time 2 different lives. It's
Mhm.
like I had this work life and then I had this spiritual life. And, I had reached a certain point. I always said the internet was a coming, right? Like, and I knew that it was going to be different and how people were going to be purchasing. And I had heard that they could be able to do it online, like what was that going to look like? And I knew it was time to like pivot. But I knew that that second career because I'd been doing that one for 14 years, that it was time to do something that I thought would be a contribution, that would be helpful, that would be, you know, and I thought I was going to be an acupuncturist. And my acupuncturist at the time said to me, Brenda, at your age. And I went, ouch, why you gotta say it like that? She said, do you really want to go back to school for 5 years and then start a new career? And I went, she goes, you know that theta, because she grew up in Europe. That theta, that sounds like something that you really like and that you'd want to do. And I was like, hmm, hmm. Food for thought. And then I just went with it. And here 20 years later, but it's really, I can be kind of be a little Bible thumper about it, because but there are many roads to get us where we want to go. And
Yes.
they
Yes.
it will just, it just depends. Like, I happen to pick the one that doesn't have that's quick, because I'm all about being effective, fast, effective, and because that's just who I am. And it's like, okay, well, this one lets me get there quicker. That's not the road that everybody wants at times, or that it's the timing isn't what works with them. And I just say, as long as you get on a road, good for
So
you.
there's two or three things that you're saying here that I just want to just, really reiterate for the listeners. One is divine timing is divine timing. You think you want it now, and if it isn't really set up and ready for you to have it now, you're going to find you're not going to get it now. And you can stomp your feet and shriek about it. You can do whatever you want, but the reality is when the timing is right, the timing is right. It doesn't mean sit on your bum and just sit back and wait. It does mean taking some inspired action, of course, which is the second point of your story that I want to talk about. So divine timing is you're right where you need to be. So when people go, when is it going to happen? My answer is always, all right, take a nice deep breath. You're right where you need to be in this moment. Just hold steady to that thing that you think you're heading towards and follow your breadcrumbs with some trust in this. You got to do some work, but yeah, there is that whole trust and faith piece of it. The second piece is you took inspired action and you followed your intuition. You have certain criteria. Hey, I want to have that happen fairly quickly. It needs to be efficient. I'm looking for XYZ. I'm ready to make a shift and pivot. I'm thinking this is a different direction. And you were willing to not be attached necessarily to a direct outcome and take an inspired action step. Those little pieces that seem so like, duh, they're really not, because most of us type A control freaks, right here, recovering type A control freak, we kind of like to have it all planned, ducks in a row, write it all out. Well, guess what? Universe is sitting back there, the lazy boy, laughing their bum bums off,
Right.
like, ha ha, good for you.
Yeah.
So good for you. Kudos for you for recognizing that you were looking for something that felt a whole lot more aligned to your soul. And through the theta healing, you're there, you've discovered it. So, for the listeners, and I know we talked about beta, alpha, theta, can you sort of give a little brief overview about why that theta, and of course my version is it's your telephone line to the divine in 5D, but can you give the listeners just a little tiny glimpse, like what are the components that happen in a theta healing modality that is beneficial to a client to help them work through challenges?
Gosh, there was so much that you said in that response that I want to respond to, but then I want to answer the question too. I'm just saying.
Go ahead, go
So,
ahead,
so,
do it
um,
all.
uh, So I want to, so hold on to that question. I will come back to it.
Okay,
You may need to say it to me again, right?
sure.
But I always find it really interesting with divine timing, right? I have people that will come as clients or as students, and it's because they want to change their divine timing, right? We're just being human. We want to change our divine timing because we want things the way that we want them. Again, our brain limits us. So we only have one solution typically. I mean, some of us have more than one, but I'm saying that we have the ones that make the most sense,
Of
that seem more
course.
practical, and that, but what I always tell people is that we want to heal, that I feel like that one of the results of us working on ourselves, especially through Theta Healing. I mean, this is my experience, is that it allows us to be in the flow with our divine timing and the faith and trust of our divine timing, so that what we are desiring is going to be usually bigger, better than we can even imagine, but that we're on that track. Because when we venture off of it, or when we put our own projections of how it shoulda, coulda, all of that, that's where our pain and suffering comes from. So when we can be in the flow and in that lane of our divine timing, that's where our joy and balance and peace come in. So that's ultimately, when we're looking at divine timing, we can't change our divine timing. We came into this world with it. But if we can be in alignment with it, again, what a world it could be, right? So that was, when you were talking about divine timing, I was like, oh, let me make that point, because I think a lot of times people think, like, again, if you're like Miel and you're that, type A control freak, right? It's like, well, no, let me just, I know best divine timing. So let me explain to you how it needs to be, right? And this is how it should, work out. And typically as humans, we're looking at the most difficult way, and divine timing's like, no, it could be way easier if you'll just be in alignment with me. So yeah, for sure. So I will go back, but I just had to say that about divine timing because I just thought it was really profound that you even brought it up. So I was like, yay, somebody's going to talk about divine timing. Let's go a little bit
Oh my
further with
gosh,
it.
Brenda, let me tell you, don't send me down the
Don't get her
rabbit hole.
started. Don't
I
get
I'm
don't
an
get her
I'm an
started.
advanced numerologist, and divine timing is like a big whoopee doo for me on many levels. So some other time we'll go down the rabbit hole of numerology and divine timing and the cycles of divine timing and transformation and all the things. But that's another story for another day. So for
Yes.
today, we're
Back
going to
to
stay
theta
in the land
healing.
of
Right.
theta healing.
I know. Doesn't sound as exciting, but it is. Here's the thing. So it's called theta healing because as a practitioner, you're going into a theta brainwave. And what's really fun is that your client will join you and they don't know it. So in group consciousness, we can get, that's why people sometimes are like, I feel so supported, or I feel so loved, or I feel like I get, like I'm really get this when you're in a group. Well, that's what happens because we're all going to the same place. It's always really beautiful. And we want to be able to do that individually as well. And so the practitioner goes into a theta brainwave. So I always say, that people can tell me how they think and how they feel, but really what they create in their lives is what they believe. And so it's just saying, I believe this. A lot of times people say, well, I believe this. And it's like, no, you think it and you feel it. Your beliefs, which are what we get as a result, of being in this life, of inheriting them, right? We inherit them. We bring them into this life. I'm going to say this group can handle talking about past lives. So we bring them in with us, and they're in our soul as well. So we have them from these four different levels, these four different ways. And then we're being in this physical world and we're like, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? And we're doing this definition of insanity, right? Repeating the same behavior and expecting a different outcome. And that's because most of the information out there is telling you to take your brain, your mind, and just change it. Well, you're aware of it, just change it. I think as humans, we have no idea how much our mind occupies wanting to be different, wanting to think different, wanting to feel different than what we're actually experiencing as a human. And it takes up a lot of space. And sometimes we're successful with it for a time, typically, but it's never permanent. And it limits us and what else, we can be thinking, doing, being. So what theta
Absolutely.
healing does is it bypasses. So the practitioner goes into a theta brainwave. And what we do in a session is we also incorporate kinesiology, muscle testing. So we test for the beliefs because you can only tell me how you think and feel, but I need to know what your beliefs are on a cellular level. So we do muscle testing. And it's like a science experiment. we have a constant. It's our yes and our no in our muscle testing. And then we find out the before. What do I believe? And a lot of times people are shocked to know what they believe. They're like, no, 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 that's not what or sometimes I'll have somebody go, no, I don't believe that. And I'm like, okay, but we're going to change it so that it can actually be in alignment with what you're saying. But here's the thing, the proof's in the pudding. Muscle testing is telling us that. And then we discover what needs to change. What are those traumas? What are those resentments? What are those beliefs? And we bypass the, the conscious and the subconscious mind, and we make the changes on a cellular level. Actually changes your DNA.
Yeah.
And then when we're done, we muscle test to confirm that the changes happened. So it's really kind of cool because it's like you have this physical proof that something has happened, which the brain loves, right? Because if the brain can recognize change, it happens even faster. And then what's really cool about this is that you will do things differently that have been caught up in your mind for you to do differently, but you're not thinking about it and you just do it. And it's as if it's always been. And that's the beautiful thing about it. And a lot of times, like in a session, what people will say is, I feel like a weight's been lifted off my shoulder. I feel like bubbles, like champagne. Like I hear that all the time because it's just like things, you know, we're not as burdened.
Yeah.
And what happens is that everybody else around us, like maybe if you're very aware and you're very conscious and you're aware, like, oh my gosh, I just did that differently, or I didn't react to that, or I did it, you know, but a lot of times it's the people around us who are like, what did you do differently? Because you're different. Like you didn't react to this, or you didn't fear this, or you just took action, or you just, and I will say like with females especially, your friends will be like, do you have a new skincare regimen? Because you look younger. Did you
What
change
are
the
you
color of your
using
hair?
on your
Yeah,
skin?
right. Did you color your hair? I mean, like literally I've had people say that to me and I laugh going, okay. Right. Because it's just but people will and of course our significant others are the ones who notice it the most. The ones who are around us, our family, that kind of thing are like, and I always kiddingly say when I used to do like active networking, I'd always have like people would want to have a woman who would want to have a coffee chat with me. And I'd be like, okay, well, I know you have an idea a little bit about what I do. How can what questions do you have? How can I help you? And she would say, my husband really needs to come see you. And I'd be like, oh, okay. And I'd say, well, the world is our mirror. So if you would like to see his behavior be different, maybe you might want to look at yourself. Like, because we have these buttons, right? And our loved ones push them for us because we expose them to them. But if we don't have the buttons any longer, then they don't have to do that. And so it'll end up, I mean, this is, 20 years, guys, doing this. It's like, one will come, she'll be like, oh, okay, well, I'll have a session. And then, her husband knows that she's having this session. And then he'll be like, hold up, because men think, of course, differently than women do. They'll be like, okay, my wife had one session. She is so much easier to get along with. She's like so much happier. She is so, like she's okay with me. Like she's happy with me, right? And because men do, they scratch their heads going, what can I do to make them happy, right? And and then they'll be like, okay, I'll go have a session. Because that's how a guy thinks. Like, sure, that seemed pretty easy peasy. Like, and yeah, I think, yeah, 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 yeah. Let me have her number or let me have her scheduling link. I'll schedule it. And that's what it took, right? Like for them to see, and not that like that's what you have to do, but it's like and some didn't even come for a session because what she was looking for to be different, it was that they were mirroring her and she didn't even know it, right? So the reflection changed and things could be different. I actually had a student one time, we would do like these little practice groups and she would go to every single one and her husband finally said, why are you going to all of these? And she said, well, can't you tell that our relationship is better? That, that we're getting along better? And he goes, oh, I thought it was just because you were trying harder. She goes, no, I'm trying less. I'm doing less.
Well,
And it
that's the
just got
thing, right?
better.
Less is more. So that's so beautiful. And we'll wrap it up here because I know you've got things to do, but less is more. It's like if we actually could set down some of these burdens that we self-impose, this whole let me externally validate. I'll people please. I'll take everything on. I'll fill my plate to overfull.
Right.
I have to squelch my own desires to meet somebody else's, like all the things. And when we can just set some of that down on the side and do a little less and work on our own, isn't it shocking that it gets reflected externally and
I know.
therefore back to us? And
Surprise,
just that
surprise.
little awareness, you're like, oh, well, look at that. Yes, it's phenomenal. It really is. And it's just nice that instead of having to get, whacked over the head to get the point, it can just be easy and comfortable and not a big deal and wow. So let people know how they can find your wow. How do we do that? Where do they
Well,
find you?
I have a website, brendabbailey.com.
Perfect.
I do also have, I feel like one of the big pieces that people don't realize what will change their life is forgiveness, right? So we carry a lot of resentments. We carry a lot of baggage with our resentments. And a lot of times in a theta healing session, I have people make a list of who they need to forgive, right? Like, just give me a list of who you need to forgive. Let's forgive them. And a lot of people do it through prayer therapy. They get to a level of forgiveness, but it's still a part of us. And some people even say, well, they don't deserve to be forgiven. Well, forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. Because I promise you, they've gone on in their lives and they're fine, merry way and haven't given you second thought. And you're here, percolating on this and, holding them accountable by not forgiving them. And it's only affecting you, right? So when you're able to do those like at a cellular level, it's completely different. But the big thing is that not only do we have to forgive that, we have to forgive our higher power, whoever that divine is for us. Because, right, like, why have you forsaken me? Why did this happen? Why, we're in that victim mode with that. But the person that we always forget to forgive is ourselves,
Yeah.
and it will set you free. And so I do have a forgiveness workbook with an audio
Perfect.
that will change it for you. And it's free. And it's called Freedom Through Forgiveness. And through is spelled THRU. So Freedom Through Forgiveness. And I mean, I I can't tell you that if a person just works on that, the difference it will make in their lives. Because again, it's those kind of things that bog us down. So,
Mm-hmm.
and if you want to have a conversation with me, I always say, I always tell people, if you got a couple of questions, www.chatwithbrendab.com. It will set you up a 30-minute chat with me. Come with your questions. I will answer them for you. And, how, like, what, would Theta Healing work with this? How does or I need a little bit more information about Theta Healing. Or, you know what? I think, because I always say, if you want to have easier clients, this is a modality that you want to learn because they will be more successful in whatever you're teaching or training them. And if you are, tell me what you do for a living. I'll tell you how to implement theta healing in it, what it would look like, whether that's something you want to learn or something that you want to be assisted in. But we don't have to do this alone. That's what takes it such a long time, is that we feel like that, our human condition typically is that we've got to do this. So feel free to have a conversation with me. There's no obligation in any way, shape, or form. I'll just give you some information to answer your questions. You decide what you want to do or what you'll take with it, what you take from that. But that's chatwithbrendab.com. And feel
I
free
love
to
it.
do that. So you can get a free workbook that'll come with audios to help you with forgiveness. Or you can, look on my website and, I have a 90-minute intro session that I do with people. That's typically, I I don't believe in ongoing work unless you want it. And so I really have a one-off session that I know that I'm leaving you okay out in the world, right? And then you do whatever you want to do. So I have a lot of different options, and I know I've just kind of spilled them all, but BrendaBBailey.com, chatwithBrendaB.com, and Freedom Through THRU, Freedom Through Forgiveness will get you that workbook.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Oh my gosh, this chat off the charts. Totally off the charts. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you for
part two.
your
We'll do a part
time.
two on divine timing, guys.
Oh, we're gonna have to
Speaking
do
of
a part
timing.
two. Oh, because I mean, I'm like little Miss Talker here. I love it. I'm gonna put all your information in the show notes, and we'll get this up and out there shortly. It'll be out in a couple of weeks. And I know I've done a lot of forgiving, but I'm just telling you flat out, and here you go, listeners, another like Miel bomb. I got plenty of forgiving still to do. And I'm gonna be honest, the majority of it is right here. This girl
Hmm.
right here, she needs to just spend some time in your workbook for herself. It's beautiful. Brenda B. Bailey, I cannot thank you enough. You
Oh,
are
and it's been
absolutely a
such a
gift.
pleasure. Such a
Such a gift.
pleasure.
We're going to do
So,
it again. Sounds
absolutely.
good.
All right.
All right, y'all. We're going to catch you next visit, next time, new episode, Energy the Untamed Heart. Thank you all. Thank you, Brenda. We'll
Thank
talk
you.
soon.